Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the County Services meeting for this evening, the 27th of February. Welcome, everybody, and welcome, justices, and we'll get going. I've asked Justice Lyons to do us the honor of prayer and pledge this evening. Justice Lyons.
Lord, thank you for bringing us all here together today. Watch over us as we go through the meeting and depart this location. Grant us all the wisdom as we consider the items on the agenda tonight to do the best for the county and its constituents. In the Lord's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Justice Lyons. And now we'll move to the adoption of the agenda. Justice Secchi.
Thank you, Judge. I do have an amendment I'd like to add from our Job Evaluation Assessment Committee meeting, and that is from Matt Durrett's office to include a position of Assistant Administrative Director. Thank you.
I have a motion by Justice Secchi to add the payroll item by Prosecutor Durrett. Second by Justice Anderson. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That'll amend the agenda. Any other amendments this evening? Without that, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda. Justice Secchi?
Judge, I'd like a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda by Justice Secchi, second by Justice Lemming. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? The agenda has been adopted. All right, we'll move into our monthly reports. I don't see Director Tinsley here this evening. We weren't notified of him being absent, so maybe something unexpected's come up. We will make sure those reports, we'll get those. Well, I guess they were in the packet, but if you have any questions for him, let's give him some grace this evening and email those to him, if you would. With that, we'll move on to the sheriff's reports. Sheriff Cantrell?
Thank you, Judge. I'll do the enforcement report, but we got them a little out of order when we sent them up to Ms. Myra, so it's actually 5.2. So you want to take a look at 5.2. Our calls for service, we're down just a tick for February, but nothing out of the ordinary on that particular section. We did have more 911 calls and more regular calls into our communication center, but we did have some hard weather, so we always get more 911 calls and more regular phone calls when the weather's bad. And it can be, I mean, people will call 911 for a variety of things, emergencies, not emergencies, accidents, but when the weather's bad, they'll call to ask how the roads are from here to Kansas City, or you know, just a variety of things. When will their power get back on, or different things like that. So nothing out of the ordinary on those calls. Last, before I move on any further, any questions about the enforcement report?
Justice Lemming?
Well, I was going to ask, I don't know if it's time, but I was going to ask, how's the bids coming on the jail? Have you had any come in?
Yes, we opened bids a couple weeks ago. Didn't get a bid on every packet. There was 25 different packets. We did get a bid on the grading and site work, and I think they're getting close to awarding that so they can start moving some dirt and getting the fences moved out of the way and getting ready for construction. The couple of the packages came in higher than they anticipated. They're going to rebid those. I think those are set to open on March the 16th.
Justice Dennis?
Thank you, Judge. Just because that came up at this point in time, I'll go ahead and ask my question on it too.
Sure.
I'm getting hit up by a lot of constituents wanting to know if a lot of those bids will be done by local people, or those people, are a lot of the work being done from out of the state people?
Well, all the bids that came in were solicited from our region, our area, and so some of those packages weren't bid. We think part of that has to do with the fact that Walmart has a multi-billion-dollar project going on, and a lot of contractors is busy up there. We talked to one electrical contractor, and he said, I didn't get the Walmart bid, but the contractor that got it has contracted my people to work. So contracted through me to hire my people. So he said, I don't have anybody to work because they're contracted to the contractor who got the bid.
Gotcha.
So it's a lot of, so you're gonna extend it, move it down into the River Valley, maybe solicit people from the River Valley. We've already had a company from Springfield, Missouri that was interested in the fence project. And then for some reason, I don't know if the word just didn't get out, but a local fence contractor has also said, hey, I didn't realize it was bid. I want to bid on it. So it's the local contractors that will be performing the work and doing those bid packets. Now, obviously, some of the specialized detention electronics and stuff are pretty specialized. There's nobody within our region that does that. They typically come from other areas, but yeah, the plumbing, the mechanical, all that's, we want it to be local. We know those dollars turn over in Washington County that are spent in Washington County.
Correct. Well, thank you very much, and
yeah.
that was a good explanation, so.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
Justice Fleming?
I just wanted to state, Jay said that everybody don't know, but that Walmart deal's over a 3-year project, so that's gonna take away a lot of people
Yeah.
to do that bidding. Thank you.
Any other questions on their enforcement report?
I just want to give a quick report. There was some discussion last month about our Act 309 detainees, and we have 19 men and 20 women. So just a quick rundown. We'll just talk about the women tonight. They work in the kitchen, exclusively in the kitchen, work 2 shifts, work 60 hours a week, each one of them. So, that's about 1,200 hours. I don't know my calculations, but anyway, if you calculated it out, it'd be about 33 people that we would have to hire to do what they do over the course of a year. And I don't know, at $40,000, kind of a base wage to get somebody in the food service industry, time you pay benefits. So it's probably about $1.3 million that it would cost in addition to our food service contract. We'd have to, they would obviously have to hire that many people. So saves us about $1.3 million, and the state pays us about $87,000 a year to house these people. Act 309 was a legislative act that was passed in 1983. So it was Act 309 of 1983. That's why they got the term 309. There's about 350 detainees or inmates at the state level that are eligible for this program, and they farm those out to sheriffs and police chiefs that have jails that can help around their jail, do cleaning, do menial tasks, whatever. So we're fortunate that we were able to get some women up here, and they do a great job in the kitchen. Much easier on the equipment than men when we had men in the kitchen. Take pride in their work. One lady that's become a really good cook said before she came to prison, all she knew how to cook was meth. So she's really excelled in that kitchen, and she'll be able to go out and get a job when she gets released in the food service industry about anywhere she wants to go. So at least she'll have a skill when she leaves. But I just wanted to give a little a brief update about what we talk about 309s, what that really means.
Great. Justice Bond?
Jay, I never did really hear about any case in particular, but do you sometimes, are you able to give them job references whenever they're
We have the University of Arkansas over at the Agri Farm has hired probably a half a dozen people through the years over there to work on the Agri Farm, doing all kinds of tasks, from operating tractors to hoeing the cotton to whatever it is they need done. But they've been, for the most part, been very good employees. They've been happy to get them.
Usually the ones that are sent up here, most of the time have some kind of family tie in this area.
That's part of this program, is to get people into the counties to help the sheriffs and the police chiefs, and to get them closer to their families so that they kind of have their visitations are closer and they can kind of get that family unit back together before they get released. So they have to be within 45 months of their release date before they're eligible for the program. So it gets them back closer to their family and helps them reconnect a little bit.
I never heard it described that way, but it seems to me it's kind of like a rehab program, and it helps people get back to work and be productive.
Yeah, I don't know that they've calculated, they may have, but I've not seen it, what the recidivism rate is for the Act 309 program, but I gotta believe it's pretty low based on what we've seen with the people that came through our program.
Appreciate it.
Justice Coger?
Thank you, Judge. Sheriff Cantrell, I just have a couple of questions. So you said there's 20 women in one, what would you say, pod or unit?
Well, there's in a housing area, yes.
Okay. And there's 19 men. How many total bed spaces are available, would those areas hold, where the 309s are staying?
Well, there are 24 beds in the male section. And I believe the women are in a 24-bed unit as well.
Okay. And with reference, you were talking about the work that they do, and what about, have you ever tried having local trustees, like people in the jail serving as trustees?
We do, yes. They do cleaning and things within the jail, car washes, some grounds maintenance, but mostly work within the detention center. But most of our trustees that we had previous were misdemeanor commitments that had got some commitment out of a district court for whatever their charge was. At the current point, we don't hold any misdemeanors or maybe just a few that are processing through. So our misdemeanor population is really down. The judges and the district courts know that we have no space to house committed county commits. We call them county commits, people that are committed to the county jail for a term. And so we just don't get many up here to make trustees out of.
Okay. So how many trustees would you say you have right now that's not the 309s?
How many trustees? Oh, I don't know. It varies from day to day and week to week. Some of the commitments that are going to prison, we'll make those people a trustee because we can move them over to a different housing unit where we might have a little bit of room and get them out of the general population. So we let them work within the confines of the facility. It helps them whenever they do get to prison to have a good record when they go down, and that they've helped us, and so they get to usually get a little extra credit for that time that they were working for us.
Okay, that's good. I appreciate that. And the state pays us $15 a day. Is that correct, or has it gone up?
It's, Randall? It's $12 a day is what the state pays for 309s.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Any other questions for Sheriff Cantrell before we move into the detention report?
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Major Denzer.
Evening. Good evening, Judge. We're still trying to get our numbers right. I think we're almost there, going from the 15th and the 15th, so some of these may be just a little bit off, as you can see. But our intakes was down a little bit last month. The prisons, it didn't reflect here, we finally did get to send about 20 to Arkansas Department of Corrections. They hadn't took anybody in about 6 weeks, so that helped our numbers. Transport's still about the same story. They're getting caught all over the United States, and we're driving 30,000 miles a month to get them and everybody else on felony charges. Then on 5.3, that's where the kind of discrepancy on our numbers, where our intakes show 564, that we show 796. So we'll have these numbers totally right by next month. Everything's in progress. But on top of that, we turned 339 loose on the sheriff's order and 63 on the OR order. Like I say, the high count back when we done this a week ago was 721, which is down 100, which is great. And our pretrial's down to 445. That was up over 500, trying to find a place for them folks. And then to go on to our graft, still about the same. Pretrials are leading. They're running just about along, just like they always have. And then the good thing about it is we only got 82 on the floor, so that's about half, but our count's down 100. So, of course, this is kind of supposed to be the slow time of the year. So, but right now it's great.
Questions for Major Denzer? Oh, sorry. Justice Coger?
Thank you, Judge. Major Denzer, last month we talked about, I asked about if you could bring us bonds, like how many people were on $5, $10, $15, $20,000 bonds. Were you
That's
able
right.
to do that?
That's right.
If you don't have it, that's okay.
No, I do. I'm sorry,
Okay.
it's on my last page.
Okay,
It's on the website that everybody can look up and to pick them up. But we had about 31 with $5,000 bond, 27 with a $10,000 bond, 17 with a $15,000 bond, and 4 with a $20,000 bond.
okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Any more questions for Major Denzer? Thank you so much, sir.
You're welcome.
Next up, we're going to have an update on our Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee. Coordinator Smith?
Thank you, Judge. The biggest change on your report here is our February failure to appear clinic, which took place last week. We had 9 pleas, 9 people get back on the trial docket, and 7 people get back on the arraignment docket. We also had 4 more people from our October FTA clinic plea since the October clinic and those continuance dates have come through. We've had almost 100 mental health deferrals, 45 from Fayetteville PD, 50 from the CSU, and we also had a robust discussion during our Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee meeting about mental health court. We have been reaching out to various counties around the state. There are, I believe, 4 other counties that have mental health courts that we are reaching out to them, asking about budgets and their position descriptions and things like that so that we can get our own started as well.
Questions for Coordinator Smith? Justice Coger?
Thank you, Judge. Ms. Smith, I was just wondering about the CSU. When they first reopened, there was a big staffing issue. They couldn't find enough staff. Do you know if they're adequately staffed now?
They are adequately staffed, yes.
So what are their hours of operation per day?
They take intakes 24 hours a day. They have enough staff to do that. They obviously have their own credentials of how they intake people, but they are available 24 hours a day,
Great.
7 days a week.
That's great. Thank you. That's all I have, Judge.
Additional questions for Coordinator Smith? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, we'll move into new business, and the first items are amendment that Prosecutor Durrett's asking for a salary adjustment. Prosecutor Durrett and Justice Secchi, would you guys like to talk to this?
Good evening. The letter before you is what I've written in reference to our new employee, Cheryl Oswalt, who is our newest administrative assistant. Excuse me. I am requesting an increase that would put her above I believe it's above the third quartile, which is why I'm here for you all. She's exceptionally well qualified for the position that she's got. She has 17 years experience at the Fayetteville City Prosecutor's Office, where she was their hot check administrator. Then she spent 11 years in our office, first as the assistant hot check administrator and then as the juvenile case coordinator, and she spent the last 3.5 to 4 years working as Judge Lindsay's trial court assistant. So by my math, I mean, that's like 31, 32 years of experience, all of which is in the criminal justice system. So she's extraordinarily well qualified, and what I'm requesting is to have her put in the slot that was getting paid for the last employee was getting paid in that slot, and so it won't have an impact. There won't be any additional funds that are necessary to pay the position. There's no additional expenditures required. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions anybody has.
Justice Leming?
I'd like to make a motion to take it to the full quorum court for approval.
It won't.
It
This action tonight will approve this since it doesn't have a budget impact.
I'd like to make a motion to approve it.
I'd like to make a motion to approve. I have a motion to approve by Justice Fleming, second by Justice Secchi. Any further discussion on this item or questions for Prosecutor Durrett? Okay. Public comments?
Sarah Moore, Fayetteville. I believe this added item was potentially seen by the JSAP committee that met earlier. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but I don't believe the JSAP meeting was posted on the public calendar. There was a determination by a judge recently in a filing that said that JSAP meetings should be open to the public, should be available for the media and for the public to participate in. And so while I'm not in opposition to what needs to happen for this particular office, I think that we need to follow what the judge's orders were and look out for the best interest of the public. And the public's business needs to be done in the eyes of the public. And so in the event that this business took place and the public wasn't available in this meeting, it does feel like this conversation needs to be had with the public. Thank you.
Additional public comments? Ms. Meyer, will you please call a roll?
David Wilson. Yes. Sean Simons. Fred Anderson. Yes. Kyle Lyons. Lisa Ecke. Yes. Charles Dean. Yes. Chandra Washington. Yes. Beth Koger. Yes. Robert Dennis. Yes. Suki Hires. Yes. Evelyn Rio Stafford. Yes. Willie Lemming. Yes. Gary Ricker. Yes. Butch Pond. Yes. Pass.
Thank you. That'll be adopted. All right, new item number 8. I have, since I've come into the judge's office, you know, me and Chief Johnson have been on a kind of what you'd consider a whirlwind tour. I thought the quorum court would give me a big head start on that, and it doesn't feel like it's giving me a big head start on some of this stuff. But one of the major gaps I've seen is Washington County lacks an emergency operations center. And so I've invited our emergency management director, Director Luther, here this evening to kind of go over why that's important to have a facility like that. And just for those of us who've been a little bit unfamiliar, that facility is where we would go in the event of a catastrophe, where the operations people would go and meet. You know, there'd be a lot of times where we might need to communicate with federal agencies, we might need to communicate with Little Rock, with other state agencies. And the reason I feel like this is so important is because emergency response is a duty specifically housed at the county level of government. So I keep using the Springdale tornado that we had last spring as an example. Fortunately, that could have been, I think, a lot worse, but you know, a lot of people were impacted. That event happened in Springdale. But it's the county and the duties vested in the county judge that really will coordinate that response, even outside of Mayor Sprouse and his team. So with that, I'd like to let Director Luther just come up and go over some points of why he thinks this is so critical, and then we'd like to open this up for any questions or discussion that you might have.
Thank you, Judge.
kind of hard to follow that because you were certainly accurate in what you were saying. Justices, thank you for having me. I'm John Luther, the emergency manager. I know some of you, and some of you are new, and I've not met all of you.
Will you pull that microphone a little bit closer to you? There, it'd be great.
I think that's about as good as it's going to get. I'll just scoot up to it. Is that okay? Some of you I've worked with a lot over the years, and others I'm just going to get to know. When Judge asked me about the Emergency Operations Center and why we did not have one, the simple answer was that we have had a location in the past that we deemed the Emergency Operations Center, and it's the location now where the CSU is housed. And at the time, we had talked to Judge Wood about we may be possibly outgrowing our EOC and its ability to serve the county as a whole. As the county grows, as the population grows, as service providers grow in size, we kind of saw that that's something that we needed to get on the radar. CSU was an issue that came up that Judge Wood dealt with and helped to get off the ground. And in that transition, we were without a home. We were moved over to the annex across the street from this facility, and we were operating out of there. It was not a hardened facility. It did not have a generator backup. It would fail if the grid were to fail, but it was certainly office space, which sometimes people think an EOC is office space, and it certainly can have office space and needs office space. But more importantly, an EOC, which the annex was not, and then again, when Judge Warren was elected, we were moved out of that facility to the current facility where we are now, in temporary housing, if you will. But it's, again, not an EOC, and you say, well, what is an EOC? And an EOC is basically the location where decision makers, possibly some of you, along with the judge, the sheriff, mayors, other chiefs of police, fire chiefs, those without offices that may come in from state or federal government, volunteer organizations. The EOC is a place where decision makers come together and operate during a crisis to help coordinate the county, state, and federal response to best serve the citizens of our county. It's simply a location that we know that's going to hopefully withstand any weather impact that it may have, any other threats that it may have, and that our decision makers can go there and be safe and collectively work together to manage the finite resources that we have. We have a limited number of patrolmen, fire trucks, ambulances, hospital beds, cots, shelters, water, food, the things that people basically need during a crisis. There's only a certain amount of that, and we need people to be able to come together and work together to know where, in fact, those resources are best sent. Along with the ability to operate post-incident, like when something has happened, Norman tornado, Ohio train derailment, Springdale tornado, flooding that we've had numerous times within the county, tornadoes within the county. We also have planned events. We have large sporting events in the fall. We have a large business that has a shareholders meeting in the summertime. We have dignitary visits from across the country. We have a lot of things that go on where the Emergency Operations Center can be the hub of coordination for that. Some of it known, some of it not. And what it allows us to do is, in that facility throughout the year, we can have our partners in for training, to get to know one another better, work together, plan together, and then obviously during a crisis or even before a crisis, we do this. I know the sheriff and others, when we were in our old EOC, ahead of the weather that we had last night and the night before, we would have had weather briefings with the Tulsa National Weather Service, and we would have invited those partners in to be able to sit through those weather briefings with the subject matter experts so that they can best plan for over the next few days, what will they face? How do they staff for it? Where do they need to put their resources? So the EOC can not only be a place that we go during a disaster, it's certainly a location that we utilize to better get to know and work together with one another preceding a disaster. And then obviously after the disaster, it's where we would work with our state and federal and local partners again to recover and hopefully get the community back on its feet as quickly as possible. I know I've deviated from my notes because I feel like it's taken me over 20 years to truly understand the benefits of an EOC, and how to relay that to people in a matter of minutes is hard to do. I kind of feel like we'd be, as somebody said, causing you to drink from a fire hose. But an EOC really is the hub of business related to emergencies for decision makers in the county to help the responders, not necessarily direct them, but to help them do the jobs in the field that they need to do to best take care of our citizens within the county. So I certainly can take questions and try to elaborate more if you have some questions for me.
Justice Secchi?
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Luther, what impact will this have on the other county services that we provide? How would it unite them?
Well, certainly, you take weather events. The road department with severe weather, whether it be flooding or whether it be ice and snow, they're heavily impacted with what they have to do once the weather has come. They're one of the partners that we would bring in and do bring in ahead of that to better allow them to interact with, in this case, Tulsa Weather and their other peers. They're face-to-face with whether it be elected officials or other responder agency heads, so that they can coordinate what they're going to do leading up to the weather, and then certainly during the weather, and then after. And during that time, we can be there as Emergency Operations Center staff, getting information from them in the field so that we know if there are things, and I'll reference the 2009 ice storm. Generators was a big need, okay? Anybody that was here in 2009 likely had their power out, some longer than others. Generators was a big need. Water was a big need. And so as we had those local communities dealing with the people within the community, they would reach back to us at the Emergency Operations Center, and they'd tell us what their needs were, and then we would coordinate in the case of points of distribution where we sent water or MREs, or the radio tower sites where we sent propane, or simply quarts of oil for the generators, or whether we helped chainsaw crews go out into the field and open up roads so that then the road crews could get through. We coordinate that from within the Emergency Operations Center, and that's again where, whether it be elected officials or other agency heads come, that can speak on behalf of their agency and commit their resources as they need to. So it helps everybody across the entire county. It doesn't matter who they are, whether they're visiting, whether they live here. If the community that they live in is affected, then the EOC can certainly be a part of helping them.
I support what you're trying to do in these efforts, because this is definitely a need that I see not only for our generation, but for the next generation. I've got 2 granddaughters, so our grandkids, this is an investment that we need to make sure that we're taking care of them in a disaster. Now, the command center, where are you located currently?
Well, right now, we're at the Arkansas Fire Academy training facility. It's a satellite facility in Lincoln that was available at the time, and so we're there. We have offices there, but it's not the most convenient location for us to work with our partners. One of the federal agencies jokes with me when we have them out for meetings. They're like, well, we're just east of the Rockies. They kind of make that joke, and they still come and they meet with us, but it's certainly not convenient for department heads, chiefs, and others to be making that drive potentially on a frequent basis. And so thankfully in this case, we're able to come in and meet with them at their locations, but that's not the Emergency Operations Center. And during a crisis, they're not prepared to house the people that need to come to work with us. They're able to, in the case of Fayetteville Police Department or Fayetteville Fire Department or the Sheriff's Office, those facilities are prepared to deal with their needs for their agency, but they're not prepared to take on what potentially may be a handful of you because your areas are and your constituents are affected, the judge, other department heads, other folks from FEMA Region 6 or ADAM at Little Rock, potentially federal partners that are in. You know, we ask a lot if we were to ask one of those agencies to kind of house us temporarily during that crisis, and that's just not the right way to do business. They would do their best to house us and help us, but they just don't have space available.
It's time that we build you a home. I mean, in other words, it's time that we, as Washington County, had our own emergency operations center in which we can effectively service the citizens of our county. So I support you. Thank you, Mr. Lucer.
You're welcome.
Justice Lemming?
John, how many years you been here?
Going on 24, starting heading toward 24.
I want to say thank you, because I've worked with you ever since you've been here. And folks, this horseshoe don't really know how important this deal really is. And when he says he talks to people plumb to Washington DC, the feds. It's not little people he talks to. He talks to people that knows, and goes. Patrick, Lance, I want to say thank y'all dearly to y'all, because we've got a judge and we got a chief of staff that gives a rat's tootie. And really, the last ones didn't. And that's why we're in the predicament that we're in. And I think we got a perfect opportunity, if we want to work with the city of Fayetteville, to work together and build a perfect EOC for all of us. And when we say an EOC, it's a bomb shelter. It's got generators, it's got food, we can go in a hole and we can stay there for a week or a month if we need to. That's basically just like Washington DC, the White House has got one under the bottom of it, it's an EOC. This deal is very, very important. And y'all would be amazed at how much work this young man does for us every freaking day, that none of you have an idea what he does for our volunteer fire departments and what he does for our people in our community already. John's not fairly paid. John he gives more time to this community than any of you ever realizes, that you don't get nickel charged for it. He gets paid, but he don't get paid what he's worth. And his people that's under him does not get paid for what they're worth. I promise you. They're good people. They're good folks. And we need an EOC. We needed it done 10 years ago. And it's time to get off our tails and get a good EOC. And I want to thank the judge and Lance, and I want to thank you, John. I love you. I've been working with you a long time, and keep up the good work for us.
Well, I appreciate the kind words. I do take it very serious. I think the well-being of the citizens of our county should be and I know I'm biased, but our life safety is the most important. That's the bottom line. That's coming from somebody whose family's been here since the 1880s. We've got deep roots in this county. I want to see this county continue to do well and prosper. I'm very vested in this county, but I think we owe it to the public. Their expectation is we take care of them when there's a complication. I know the new emergency manager that came in with Children's Northwest, one of his first phone calls after he met with his leadership was to come and meet me and see our emergency operations center. And I can tell you I was a little frustrated that I said, we don't have one right now. Because their expectation is that we would. And that if there's a problem, they would be able to come to us for support in a crisis. And I will say that thankfully, Willie kind of bragged there a little bit. I don't know if that's deserved, but if we do a good job, it's because of our partners. I know just in this room, Jay and Randall, I have the highest respect for them. And every time over my many years that I've contacted them for something, they have been there to help us. And just in this case, prior to you taking over, Judge, I talked to Sheriff, and I said, Jay, if we have a crisis, can we at least come to you and depend on your facility with a generator, and we may have to operate out of the lobby or do whatever we have to do? And he said, you can. He said, we know it's not well suited for that, but we certainly wouldn't turn you away. And I said, well, I appreciate that. And so our successes are based on all of our good responders within this county. And we want to do what we can to support them when they're in the field operating and taking care of the citizens of our county.
Justice Simons?
Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Mr. Luther, for bringing this before us today. I'm in the risk mitigation industry, so I can obviously see the important impact that type of facility would have. And I might be getting a little bit further into the discussion than we're prepared to get into tonight, but my thought kind of jumps to does the county have current assets that we could leverage? Or are we talking about building a brand-new structure from the ground up or ground down, maybe? You mentioned the need to have this be a hardened facility, which the construction cost would obviously be different than just building a normal structure. The technology input in that, the security measures, the accessibility, like all of this becomes, very, very high level. Do we have any county assets that you know of that we could leverage into something like that, or are we looking at?
Facilities, are you referencing facilities? I think the thing that we would be wise in doing is looking at and getting some outside partners to evaluate what we have and to tell us a recommendation as to where we might go. I think we would be wise to talk to our partners within the county to see if there is something that could be added on to, be retrofitted. The entire property doesn't have to necessarily be, as Justice Lemming said, a bomb shelter. I think there are certainly parts that need to be hardened and that we know will withstand almost any direct impact, certainly from weather, so that we're able to operate, so that we can take care of those people that are out there that are affected. Does the entire property have to be that way? I think there needs to be some security measures certainly in place, but the entire property doesn't have to be built to those specific standards. Would I like that? 100%.
Sure.
But I think we also have to be practical and realize that it's taxpayers' funding, and we want to be diligent with funds, and we want to use them correctly. And I think parts of it need to be built, as you said, able to withstand problems, but others may be able to be done more like normal day-to-day business offices. But again, I think we need to ask and study and have input from others to know exactly what the right direction to go is.
Yeah, I think where I'm at with it is this is in its infancy. But, we wanted to present this to you guys and get, I guess some idea of consensus of if this is something where we want to run as a county. And so then we can start really pulling at some of these strings that we've been given. I think we've had, several different scenarios that might work out, partnerships. Justice Lemming mentioned that with, maybe another agency where we could partner with a building and things like that. And so it's just good for us to get a consensus from you guys. Is this something we want to do? We might have a balance of ARPA funds, and this would be a use that's explicitly listed in that. So you start thinking about that, we're really going to have to hit the ground running. If we wanted to, you have to appropriate those by the end of 24. You have to get them spent by the end of 26. We're already hearing the challenges that we have constructing other things. And so, that's where I'm up for it, if you guys are up for it, and we'll just start getting a plan together and seeing what a building looks like. What does it cost? I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of unknowns, but I wanted to go ahead and bring this to you guys early on so you could have input and get into the process with us. So.
One comment I think is worth mentioning, this doesn't sound like a wish list item. It kind of sounds like a necessity, and I think it behooves all of us on this court to take a look at our constitutional obligation of providing county services. And if a catastrophic event happens and we're unable to do that, then we're not filling the role that we were elected to do. So
I will say, since I've come into office and my time that I've gotten to spend in Little Rock and learn a little bit about emergency management and response and stuff like this, it's a little bit surprising to leaders around different parts of the state that a county of our size doesn't have something like this. Justice Dennis?
Thank you, Judge. First of all, I would say second to everything Willie said, or amen, however you want to say it. Everything he said was exactly correct, and appreciate everything that you've done over the years. You've been there for us. You really have. A lot of people don't know it, but you have, and I know it. Can you tell us some of the other successful areas? We're now such a fast-growing area that we can't compare ourselves to everything in Arkansas anymore. Is there any place that you'd say, well, look at what they're doing here. We could emulate or copy that. Or where do we need, how do you go about finding out what the ideal thing to do is?
Post-Katrina, Judge Hunton and Jay and I and Sheriff Helder and Ron Wood and others John Gibson went to some parishes in Louisiana to look at emergency operations centers there because they were certainly affected by that natural disaster, and it was clear at the time that we didn't have one. Historically, we haven't had one, but we went down there, we viewed some different emergency operations centers, and we came back, and that's when we realized that without having the funds to build another facility or a new facility, we kind of parlayed the old juvenile detention center into an EOC for us that I think served us well until we outgrew it. When you look at Northwest Arkansas Regional Planning, and you look at the various business magazines and the news, Northwest Arkansas is growing. We all know that, and it's not going to stop, they don't think. And if you think, where are we going to be in 20 years? They're anticipating by 2040 that we're going to double our population. Washington County needs to make an investment in an emergency operations center for today and for in the future. So do we look at a Dallas, a Salt Lake, a Seattle? Do we look at Palestine, Ohio?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's something that we have to consider as we look at some other places and say, what have you done? Does it work for you? Do you recommend it? And again, I think some outside counsel with people that build those facilities can certainly help us with even questions that we may not know to ask. But I think what we do and what you do is not potentially going to be for now, it's for now, potentially decades to follow. And I think the consideration that you give this and the commitment that you give it is what's going to take care of people for many, many years to come. Yep. Yes, sir.
Justice Rios Stafford?
Thank you, Judge. And I wanted to thank you for everything you're doing and your service to the county. And I agree with you that, you know, we are an incredibly fast-growing county, and as we continue to grow and grow in population, the potential for a disaster to affect a larger and larger number of people is going to keep growing. So I do think something like this is needed, and I definitely agree with the thought of looking at the best practices of other fast-growing counties or other counties that have, you know, experienced fast growth in the last couple decades. Definitely agree with that. I have a question that's a little similar to J.P. Simon's question, but a little bit different, just in terms of, you know, location. I know you mentioned being out in Lincoln is how inconvenient that is. What would be an ideal location for something like this? Would it be, say, for example, something near the sheriff's department? Would it be something you know, in one of the larger cities like Fayetteville or Springdale, or outside the city, near a freeway, outside of a flood zone or something like that? What kind of considerations?
Well, certainly we would appreciate not being in a floodplain.
Yeah.
Certainly access to our major thoroughfares is important, but being off those major thoroughfares a certain amount of distance is probably responsible, depending on what's available. Centrally located to serve all the people within the county, certainly the municipalities that will come to us, you know, as they need to. You know, I don't want to say that, you know, Lincoln's completely inconvenient, because certainly Lincoln has needs.
Good for them. Yeah.
And we've gotten to spend a lot of time with the folks in Lincoln, and I can honestly tell you, we've enjoyed that. We've had some of their public safety folks come and see us on a more frequent basis because we're there. And we've worked with the city of Lincoln to do some exercises. One was a tornado, and next thing you know, we have Springdale. So we hopefully help Lincoln and their folks kind of think through those processes that they might face in the event that weather had struck them. But to answer your question, is there a perfect location? Well, for somebody. but for somebody else, it's not perfect. So I think we would just have to collectively say, what's the best location to serve Washington County as a whole? First and foremost, the safety of the facility, and then access to it from others. So, you know, I can't put a pin out there for you at this point, but I certainly think those are things we want to consider, is where do we put it and how does it serve everyone that needs it?
Great. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Justice Pond?
All my questions have been answered since I pushed the button, and I appreciate that. But I wanted to tell you, John, you and your department have my support on this, and I don't really believe anybody meant anything negative about the location where you are now. It's just not central to Washington County. And convenience might not have been the correct word. It's accessible, something that's more efficient, more capable for you to reach more people in any corner of the county as quickly as you can. And I've got all the confidence in the world in you and your department, even though right now you're kind of operating like a pack of nomads. But I mean, you've been shuffled around 3 or 4 times since I've been on the court, and you've come through with every situation that's happened. And I really don't believe there's any other county with a department like yours that's more prepared than you are, even with you having to be pushed around and shuffled here and there. And I don't know about the bomb shelter part of it, but it sure, maybe you need a bomb shelter in it, but the whole thing needs to be constructed like a storm shelter. We don't want a storm blowing any part of your department away, or we don't want it washed away in the flood. And I'm anxious to see what we come up with the rest of our partners, and that need your department. Thank you for what you do.
Yes, sir. Well, we have had a good amount of support from our peers. They've certainly asked us when we would take this task on, and I said, you know, we present it and we see where it goes, and they said let us know how they can support us. I do want to say, and I would be remiss if I didn't do this, there's been some nice comments made about our department, and I want to say it's just that. I have 2 other full-time employees. I have 2 part-time employees that are other full-time responders with other agencies, but those 2 full-time employees and our 2 part-time employees, and 1 full-time employee we unfortunately lost to another division within the county. We're a small office. It's a big ask, and we could not do it without those folks in my office. I could not. They're much more valuable probably than even I know, but we also cannot do it without our public safety partners. If I need something, as I said earlier, I need a body to help with this project, I can reach out to the sheriff, I can reach out to police chiefs and fire chiefs and others, and they've always complimented us with sharing of their staff as we need them. And that's one thing about an emergency operations center. It would not just be us. It's representatives from those other fields of expertise that are also responsible, that will commit people to that mission, along with our elected officials and then all the outside partners that come in. So, you know, at that point, I can do what I do best, and that's just to kind of get out of the way and let smart people work. And that's probably helped me the best, is, you know my place, get out of the way, and let people come together that are truly the experts and let them take care of people. So.
Justice Fleming?
Well, we could talk about this all night. We could have a good time. But we all know, we love you in Lincoln. We'd rather for you stay in Lincoln, but we all know that's not the place you need to be. You need to be in the central hub. You need to be where the airports are, because you got big people flying, you know, and you got to have motels and hotels. And I really believe you need to be right here in the city of Fayetteville, and I really believe that we strongly need to get the city of Fayetteville to help us and be behind us and work with them dearly to help get this deal going. And I think that, because this deal is so important to all of us. And John, touch on just a little bit of what all you do for, like, Stop the Bleeds for police officers and first responders, and talk just a little bit about what you do at schools on whenever they have a massive shootings and stuff like that, because that really touched people's heart of how much training and stuff you do for them people. And it will go through your EOC and how much that really helps for a lot of communities stuff. Thank you.
Well, we do try to coordinate any training that we can related to all the emergency services. I know tomorrow morning I'll be on a radio project call, and Kyle Curry in our office will be with Central EMS, and I believe Fayetteville PD and some others at Black Hills. And there's about 200 folks that they will train on how to effectively use a tourniquet to stop bleeding on an extremity. And you think about a company like that and the potential that their people have to go out and working with excavators and large tools and different things, they could get hurt and we could lose life. And so our folks will go in and they'll spend a couple hours with them and start the training process, and that'll be something that we'll continue on with them. Again, we do that in partnership with other service providers. We've been partners with the Sheriff's Office for many years now, doing training in schools for active shooter response, Stop the Bleed again. We believe that we can empower children to survive if there's a problem. We don't want to teach them to go hide and be a victim. We want to teach them to survive. We feel like they're capable of it. We ask a lot of them in sports and gymnastics and band and academics, and they're smart and they're capable, and the best thing that we can do is teach them how to survive those scenarios. And so one of the things that we do there is work with our law enforcement partners, and we go into the schools and we train the staff and students on, simply how to use a tourniquet. You think, well, how old do they need to be to do that? Well, when I started taking my son, he was about 5, 6 years old, and he loved to show the adults how well he could apply a tourniquet. And you have a child that age showing adults how to apply a tourniquet, it's kind of hard for the adults to say we can't do this. And now he's 15, and so I don't get to take him as much because he's got other commitments. But I do believe that our greatest assets are those children. They're our greatest resources, and they were historically unprotected or poorly protected, and we didn't know better. But now we do, and for many years we've worked. Thankfully, the Sheriff's Office took that as a priority as well, and they continue to partner with us on it, and the other law enforcement agencies and fire service agencies. So we do that. We do CPR training. We coordinate those. We work with the Arkansas National Guard and various state agencies for a number of programs. We have a helicopter rescue team that goes in and you've seen them on TV where they go in Lakota or Black Hawk, and they're lowered via hoist down to where someone's injured to fall off a bluff or on a home that's flooded, and we're able to take our rescuers, civilian rescuers, and put them in Department of Defense air assets and move them in there and put them down. We're one of a handful of states in the nation that can do that. It's our county and Pulaski County that partner for the state USAR team. That's one of our pieces of the state USAR team. We house the state USAR team, which is responsible basically from the northern part of Texarkana over to Jonesboro as the primary response. And so if we have a major emergency in that corridor, your folks, your local responders here, and our equipment are going to go there. Pulaski County takes the southern half, and then we certainly back one another up there. We've got that. We've got Chem Biorad nuke response teams that are specialized. We work with the Sheriff's Office for regional, and Fayetteville PD and Springdale PD for regional SWAT to help those folks better prepare. And so we just work with anybody that we can to hopefully make the community safer.
Do you have a follow-up?
Like I said, we can talk about this all night because it's very important. Right now, in the state of Arkansas, if you go to Little Rock, if you go to Pine Bluff, they're always bragging on what Northwest Arkansas does with all of their volunteer fire departments, with John Luther's office. We done the air pack deal, and it was in, what paper was it, all over the country. They was trying to figure out how to do the air pack deal like we did for all of our volunteer fire departments. Northwest Arkansas, they brag on us everywhere we go. And so we need to put trust in John, Kyle, and John is gonna go talk to Dallas, talk to California, talk to Little Rock, and he's gonna come back with what you need is an EOC. And I don't wanna go build one like what's in Pine Bluff, and let's build one what Washington County wants to build. Let's let people look up to what we've built, and let's say, hey, look what they've done, it's good. And I don't think we need to go find a building across the street and cobble it up. You still got an old building that's cobbled up. Let's bite the bullet. Let's build this thing from the ground up. Let's do it right. Let's let the state of Arkansas brag on us. And let's let them look up to us. And let's do a good job. Let's continue doing a good job for our community like we've done. I've been in the fire service 44 years, and I'm very proud of it. And I've donated millions of hours for doing it. John has too. There's a lot of firefighters in Northwest Arkansas that's done the same thing. It's just not me. There's a lot of guys that's volunteered a lot of time to get this boat where it's at. And we've got a heck of a boat sailing, and it's really, really good. And we need to continue that. And we need to let John get us some information, do a good job. I know you will. I trust you 100%. So I think that's what we need to do. Thank you.
Justice Lyons?
Thank you, Judge. I've lived in a lot of places. Grew up in a small town in East Tennessee called Athens, Tennessee. Went to school in Murfreesboro. Was out in Chandler, Arizona, Omaha, Nebraska. Every one of them had an EOC. You watch any news that has disasters, they're always communicating out of the EOC. Not having an EOC for Washington County is a failure to our citizens. Sir, I want to congratulate and thank you and your team for taking on a job and doing the services you've been able to do without the tools you need. You know, taking all the pieces and parts, pulling it together, pulling some bubble gum and baling wire and pulling it all together and doing what you have done. But we need the EOC to go forward. So Judge, my question to you is, what motion do you need to move this forward?
I don't think we need a motion. I'm getting a consensus here that you guys might like to move forward. Now, there will be probably motions in the future that we need, and there's gonna be some costs to that, but I mean, I think we're gonna start really exploring that. What I needed tonight was a consensus from each one of you about where we wanted to move, because if we start dedicating man-hours to this, you know what I mean, and we wanted to get some sort of sentiment from
So
you.
do you have what you need, or do you need us to go around and take a vote to give you the consensus
I
you
think
need?
we have what we need now.
Okay.
And we just need the continued support in the future. Yep.
Thank you.
Justice Simons?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Luther, as I'm trying to visualize what your need is and what moving forward might look like, you spoke a lot about collaboration. This facility, once it's in place, is it being used on a day-to-day basis, or is it only used during those catastrophic emergency times and then training for the mitigation of those things? And where I'm going with this is, might we look at some of those partners that you're already working with and say, hey, do you have need for office space or for facilities to utilize, and this building not just be an EOC that's empty 99% of the time, heaven forbid, unless there's an emergency, or is it constantly being used day in and day out as a collaborative hub for these partners to be working with, training with one another, making sure that things like our radio systems are, working across channels and all of this?
That's a great question. When we first secured the juvenile detention center, as it was after the sheriff's office left that facility, and we made it the EOC for Washington County, we were not there. And I don't remember. I apologize. I'm not good at remembering, timelines. But a year or two passed, and we weren't there. We were officed in the south part of in the south campus. And finally, it became evident to our bosses that we're going there periodically for meetings. Why are they not there all the time? And we wanted to say, well, that was a good question we wanted to ask, but you didn't want us there all the time, and we weren't. When we went there, it truly opened the door for us to literally open the door to our partners to find training and meeting space, to keep it occupied, to keep people there as much as we could, to have people stop in. If there was someone with one of the federal agencies here and they came in from Little Rock to see the Fayetteville office, and they could come by and meet us and talk, and we could learn about a training that may be going on in a few months, or we could coordinate with them. We offered space to our local responders to use it for training. We hosted trainings. So it was daily office space. And one thing I like to say, and I've said this to a lot of people, is if you're not working with us, it's your fault. Our door's open. And we don't know everything, but we're willing to have you in, and we want you to work with us. And we learn a lot from a lot of people for that reason, but that's just the way I feel like the EOC should be run as well. Door needs to be open. We need to have all of our partners in there, to include at times the public. The public needs to be able to come and get training there for things that may help them. So no, I would not want something to have it available only for a time of crisis or leading up to it, because what about a no-notice emergency? The earth starts shaking right now, a new Madrid cracks open in those 19 counties over there. We're gonna lose potentially 1,000 bridges. All of a sudden, Northwest Arkansas is the first responder. Now, I never thought about being a first responder to 5 hours from home. I think of a first responder as a guy that runs across the street to the neighbor's house or somewhere like that in the community where you live, but that can happen, and that's why we need the facility, and that's why we need people there, and that's why we need to be operating there all the time so that everything is fresh and tested and exercised. And we have our partners that are habitually coming there. It's not a new place for them. We would want an office so that the sheriff's office has an office in there that they can have things that they may need, or the fire department, or the Red Cross, or Salvation Army, and others that they know to come there. They know they're welcome there. They have access, and when things go bad, they're there. That we expect them to come. So, very good question. Yes, sir.
Justice Coger?
Thank you, Judge, and thank you, Mr. Luther.
Yes, ma'am.
I do have some questions. A lot of my questions have been answered as others have been speaking, but, so bear with me. I'd just like to go down my list and start, so I don't miss anything. First of all, have you looked at grants that would help with this?
Yeah, we have not found any available Emergency Operations Center grants. And that is something that if we had one, we would love to take advantage of that, if you will. I think that grants are very helpful, and we just have not had that opportunity. Yes, ma'am, but that's a great question, yeah.
How much money, what kind of grants did we get from Homeland Security grants this year? How much was, I know we've seen the amounts, but I don't remember.
Are you talking about the most recent 22 grant?
Well, how about 21 and 22, if you know that off the top of your head? I'm just curious.
I would say probably, I'm just gonna give you a general figure, if that's okay, around 750,000 each. Yeah. But the unfortunate, about 750,000 per year. I'm just
Per year,
guessing.
okay.
It may be higher or lower, but we'll just use that for an example. The complication with that is, though, those grants aren't eligible for that type of deal, or we would have certainly tried to parlay those grant funds into use for an EOC. Yeah.
Okay, so that amount includes the SWAT, the weapons of mass destruction, and?
Well, those grants go to things for the regional SWAT and to the Seaburn team, what people used to call hazmat, but it's not basic day-to-day hazmat where you have a spill at Walmart or something like that. It's for, those grants are basically terrorism-based. Those things go to fund those teams in preparation of terrorism. Now, the nice thing is, if you have a hazmat or something, and the tools that the hazmat team might need, various gas detectors or other, meters that can, like Ohio, those tools can be used in that response, but certainly non-day-to-day events. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think. So as you've traveled around and looked, you did say you've been to look at other facilities, correct?
We did a long time ago, ma'am. It was right after Hurricane Katrina, yes. So there's
Okay,
been,
that was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, but when you were there, did you get any cost on their operation centers that you saw? I mean.
Yeah, I mean, we very possibly did. It's just been so long ago, I don't know how any of those costs would be applicable.
Well, we've got plenty of time. We can look around for at that. The other thing that you mentioned a while ago, you said something, or maybe it was J.P. Lemming, I think, who was the first one that mentioned partners. Mm-hmm. And I was very glad to hear him say Fayetteville, but what about Springdale?
Yeah, I think it'd be very important to ask, sure, yeah. And I think any of the towns. I mean, a county EOC for the whole county. Yeah.
So you would see Fayetteville and Springdale bearing part of the cost?
Yes, they have helped in the past when we did the one that was at the CSU. They helped with some of the minor renovations that we did there. I can't remember exactly what that was, but they certainly helped then. And, you know, are they in a position to do that now? I don't know. I mean, that's above my pay grade, you know, those kind of things. But certainly, we want them there operationally. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so besides, what other partners would you envision that we would have besides the county and Fayetteville and Springdale?
Well, I think when we say the word partners, understand that it's the county's obligation to do this, but we would open our doors to our partners to come in so that as decisions are made during the crisis, our partners are at the table. That's really what, when I say our partners, that's what I mean. I don't think it's an obligation that the Red Cross ought to bear costs for this, or Salvation Army, or the Baptist men, or, you know, I don't see the state of Arkansas. I mean, I think more it's just we invite our partners in to help us with the operation.
Okay, and Judge Deacon said something about it was that a county this size should already have a facility like this, or something along that line. So what counties around us do have centers like this that you're talking about? I'm just
The
wondering.
counties around us all have designated EOCs. Now, they're probably vary in what their makeup is, but each one has one, and most all the counties in the state, some are more robust than others, yeah.
Okay, does Madison County have one?
They have their emergency management person who just left, and I've not spoken to their new one other than on the phone, has a designated location that they go to. Yes, now, is it built to the, you know, needs that we would have, and do they have the ability to have it where it's, you know, able to withstand direct hits from tornadoes and things of that nature? I don't know that, but I do know they have an EOC, yeah.
Well, do you think Madison County would be a good person too to be included in that, or like share?
Well, you know, if you were looking at a regional facility, then it's very possible that you'd have someone outside your county there. I think it would probably not, I mean, again, I'm speculating that
Right.
would their judge and quorum court and others want to be, you know, potentially located in another county during an emergency, and their agency heads and their emergency responders. I mean, part of the benefit of having an EOC centrally located within your county is the proximity that you are to those that you're supporting. I mean, would it work? Certainly. I mean, I guess, you know, anything's possible, but I haven't in any way pursued any comments from anybody about that type of thing.
I think I want to jump in here and say that this is the risk of bringing something so very early to this, is we don't have an answer to a lot of these questions, but
Yeah.
we wanted to get with you guys on the front end. I mean, I guess if there could be a blanket answer to that, I think anything's on the table right now for us to be frugal and efficient and getting a really robust emergency operations center to that degree. Once again, we're in the very infancy of this thought.
Okay, I wasn't through, but I lost my spot. Just a moment, please. Okay, one more thing, or could you speak about the 911 center that we have? How would that work with this?
Well, the 911 center, the consolidated center, is at the sheriff's office now.
Right.
And let me say this, there are 3 public safety answering points in Washington County once the consolidation is done. Fayetteville, Springdale, and at the sheriff's office. That's where the 3 911 answering points will be. And so that center wouldn't necessarily move from that location. That would not be something that has to move, is where the call centers are. So it would not impact that. Could it? It could, but I don't know why you would want to necessarily uproot and spend the money to duplicate what we're doing there now, at least for those 12 call takers and dispatchers. I think that's going to work very efficiently where it is, and you know, the investment that the county has made to improve that and consolidate, I think is really a good location for many, many years to come.
Well, I wasn't saying I wanted to. I was just curious if that was
Oh, okay.
in
I just
the plan.
I wasn't sure what you were wanting exactly.
Well, I didn't know if they might work together. The other thing, when you said your peers had asked you to take this on, could you elaborate on who your peers are? that
Well,
ask you to
our
take this?
fire chiefs, police chiefs, and just different ones within the emergency services, they know in a crisis that they may be expected to come and represent, the services that they provide and work around the table with other decision makers, and so I know
Okay.
they would certainly support that, yeah.
Okay, and how many people, we talk about the bomb shelter, how many people would you expect that would hold?
Well, I think that was probably a use of words, not necessarily a bomb shelter, but a facility that could take the impact of very, very severe weather. So it's not a bomb shelter like where we would take people and secure them for, a nuclear blast. It would be that the facility would be able to take severe weather impacts, but still be operational, so.
Oh, okay, I didn't get that from
Yeah.
the others. Okay, well,
Yeah.
that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think it was a good discussion. I think we have a momentum to move forward, and we'll continue to do this. And I appreciate you coming and spending some time with us this evening, Director Luther, and
Yes, sir.
we'll get to work.
Thank you all.
All right, we'll move on to item number 9, introduction of non-governmental organization application seeking funding support from the American Rescue Plan. I wanted to take this opportunity tonight with so many new justices on the court to just bring you up to where we are right now with this process. So last year, we decided to partner with the Northwest Arkansas Economic Development District to help us review the applications that we received. We received several of those. Ms. Catherine Baker's here from the Economic Development District this evening to kind of go over those with us. So what the goal is tonight is I want you guys to have an understanding of how she did the work, how she came to the conclusions, and then what resources you're going to have to review these applications. And then what we're working on in our office really hard is these applications they vary in size. Some of them are pretty voluminous in terms of the materials they turned into us, and we're trying to figure out how to efficiently get those to you justices so that you can start looking over them. We also have I'm going to go in this logistically because I want to get this process started. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to get you guys information as we get it, as it's ready. The other thing that we have is some of this information is sensitive. Like, some of these organizations have turned in tax returns to us, and it has sensitive financial information, and we're trying to understand what our obligation is there to protect that information for these different organizations. So I wanted you to have a little bit of insight there in terms of kind of what I know that this process, we feel it's a little bit behind. We're trying to move that as quickly as we can so you guys can start digesting it. What I will say is tonight, Ms. Baker and Ms. Brandy Wilhite's our American Rescue Plan coordinator here in the office. I feel an immense responsibility to make sure this process is kind of fair to everyone involved, both to you as justices, but also our applicants. So what I'm saying is, my goal is let's let you understand the process tonight, how you would move forward to view these, and then we're going to get these applications to you guys to start looking at them. Ms. Baker and Ms. Wilhite are not prepared tonight to answer questions about any specific application or organization, if that makes sense. That'll come later after you guys have had time to digest them and get familiar with them. Does that make sense? And with that, I'd like to introduce Ms. Catherine Baker from the Economic Development District and Ms. Brandy Wilhite. And like I said, they want to come up here and give you guys kind of some insight and let you have the opportunity to ask questions about how we're going to start digesting these applications. Welcome, Ms. Baker. If you will, I think there's maybe the button on the right. Shoot that for me. Yep, there you go.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. This has been a long process, as you're very much aware. I'm Catherine Baker. I'm an attorney. I work at the Northwest Arkansas Economic Development District in Harrison. We serve 9 counties of Northwest Arkansas and all the municipalities they contain. My job there is twofold. I work to administer grants, state and federal grants, and ensure compliance. And I also serve as in-house counsel and am very familiar with the risks associated with expending grant funds. And so the first thing I would like to address to you all as JPs is that it's important to remember in evaluating these applications that the funds that have been given to Washington County under the rescue plan belong to you, and you are ultimately responsible for how they are all spent, whether they go to a nonprofit, any of these nonprofits that have applied or not. And so it's important to remember that when it's audit time and those funds are audited, you are the person who is responsible for how those funds are spent. So part of the evaluation process, and I'll just walk through my matrix that developed over the process of reviewing these applications. Well, I'll walk through that first, and then we'll come back to the county's risk in sending ARPA funds out to other agencies over which you have no control. When we received applications, the first step was to read all of them and get an idea of kind of what was out there. Rescue plan is new for all of us, and so as we developed a way to evaluate the applications, there were some obvious qualifications that we needed to look at. For example, there are 4 types of eligible expenditures under the rescue plan. Premium pay, which no one asked for. Lost revenue, which only applies to governments, so that was not asked for. Infrastructure, water, wastewater, and broadband, and we did have a few applications for that. But then the great bulk of the applicants were applying under the responding to the COVID-19 emergency, not under the public health branch of that, but under economic harm. So the fact that we didn't have many different types of applications made it a little easier to evaluate there. And there were very few applicants who applied for an intended program or a proposed program that didn't really fit under any of those 4 categories. I think all the applicants pretty well understood that they needed to fit there. The other requirements that we had to look like, once we knew that it was an eligible project in concept, that it did fit in one of those 4 categories, was to look at some of the other limitations that we find in the rescue plan. For example, that the funds have to be expended by the end of 2026. So for example, if we got an application for a very large building project and the land had not been purchased, the architect had not been procured, and there were no permits in place, it was just an idea, very unlikely that that's going to be completed by 2026. And so I might mark that as an ineligible project, even though it's the concept is good, it's impossible that it would be completed in time and that the rescue plan funds would be spent according to the rules of the plan. Another aspect that's discussed quite a bit in the Rescue Plan Act is proportionality. So what they talk about there is that any proposed project has to be proportional and responsive to the harm that it's attempting to address. And so every application had to be evaluated in that regard. We had to identify the COVID-related harm that the applicant was attempting to address, and then evaluate whether their proposed response was proportionate and responsive to that harm. So that's, not a cut and dried checkmark kind of evaluation. But in some cases, it was pretty clear to see that the proposed project was not responsive in proportion to the harm experienced by the intended beneficiary. For example, if there was an ongoing project, this is just hypothetical, let's say it was a homeless shelter, which is presumed eligible. Some categories of persons are presumed low income under the rule, and that would be one. And they've submitted their budget, they haven't experienced loss, but they just want exorbitant salaries, like clearly exorbitant salaries for the administrator. Well, that's disproportionate. It's not addressing the intended beneficiary. It's not addressing a harm, and it's disproportionate. And so when I evaluated the applications, that was the kind of thinking process I was using to look out for the best interests of the county, to not place the county in unnecessary risk, that the funds would be disallowed under an audit and the county would have to pay them out of your own funds, and also that the taxpayers will be protected. I know we've all loved the sloshing pool of rescue plan funds. I've dealt with it a lot at my office. But this is taxpayer money, and we have to be as cautious with it as you are with any other tax funds that the county receives. Another part of the evaluation was to be sure that the intended beneficiary of the proposed project was an eligible class or category under the rule. And this, you know, most of the projects sounded great to me. I work with a lot of nonprofits in my day-to-day work. I hope that no one whose project was found ineligible for rescue plan funding thinks they didn't have a good project. It's just that it didn't fit under the rules of the Rescue Plan Act. Just as we heard earlier that certain grants don't fit every kind of potential use, even though it might be a great idea or maybe even more needed than what the grant is for, you still have to go by the rules of the grant or the funding will be disallowed. You'll have to pay it back. So, for example, we had a lot of good project ideas, not a lot, but there were a few that stood out that had a good service that they were providing, but the beneficiaries of it were just kind of the public. They weren't a disadvantaged class. They weren't a minority group. There wasn't any way to fit under the rescue plan that the beneficiary was and the type of beneficiary that the rule intended these projects to be geared towards. And the rule's flexible on it. They allowed us to create classes of beneficiaries to fit, but they still have to fit within the structure of the rule. So as we read and reread and reread and reread the applications and began applying all these different evaluation points, the process kind of developed as we went along. This is new for us, and so it became a little bit complicated. And what I've done, and then before I move on to our evaluation forms, we knew that the county wanted the projects to be reasonably county-wide. We wouldn't want a project to be just narrowly focused on one community unless there was some compelling reason that it would be eligible, but to serve more or less the county as a whole. So that was another thing that we looked at. And finally, as for example, the city of Fayetteville has allocated some of their rescue plan funding to nonprofits or non-governmental organizations. We had to consider the Stafford Act, which lets us know that you can't have two grants from the same grant pool paying for the same project unless all of those funds from both can be used to cover that project. For example, if I had a budget request of $100,000 and Fayetteville gave me $100,000 of rescue plan funding, I couldn't then also receive $100,000 from Washington County for the same project. That's against the law. So projects that were funded by other rescue plan funds would not be eligible to be funded by another entity with the same funds. So another thing that was part of the evaluation was to remember again that the county is responsible for every nickel of these funds and will be audited on them. Some organizations presented themselves as being more capable of being responsive to financial records requests, et cetera, just in the way that they filled out the application. I can't think of any example that was disqualified because of that, but it was something to consider as we looked at the applications, you know, remembering that the county has no control over these other groups and will not be able to compel them to submit the information that the county will need in order to comply with an audit. If you have an internal problem, there are many other people that can come in and gain access to that bank account. They can log into that computer. Nothing that's owned by an employee in this building is owned by that employee. But when you're looking at a third party, you have to keep in mind that you will not have any way to access their bank account, that you can't get their bank records. You'll just have to trust that entity to comply. So although that wasn't a formal part of the evaluation matrix, it is something to consider as you look through the applications. And again, my job was to provide, to create an evaluation process and to provide advice and my own results of what I discovered and concluded as I went through each application multiple times. You guys are the ones that are going to vote, or the quorum court will be the ones who vote on which ones to approve and which not. But again, I just want to strongly advise that you take all of those kinds of recommendations into consideration in evaluating the risk to the county as you send rescue plan funds out the door. I think that's all I have to say. Does anyone have any questions for me before and Brandy and I work together closely on going through applications, talking through the process, and developing this evaluation process as we went along. We didn't start out day one with this evaluation process fully formed. It developed as we went through, reread the rule, and reread the evaluation, or the applications. One other thing I forgot to mention is that there are two types of recipients of rescue plan funding. There are beneficiaries and there are subrecipients. So for example, if I have a food bank that says, we lost revenue during COVID and we want you to give us $100,000, they would be a beneficiary because it's going directly to them. They're receiving the benefit of that. If we have another food bank that says, we want to provide XYZ service to the people who come to the food bank, we would like $100,000, they are a subrecipient because the funds are flowing through their organization and they're benefiting another person down the line, the person who's visiting the food bank. Those have different reporting requirements in the Treasury reporting guidelines. So a subrecipient is going to have more stringent reporting requirements. And so in the evaluations that I've found to be eligible in every sense, I indicated whether they were a beneficiary or a subrecipient, and that could be part of your decision-making process, knowing that if they're a subrecipient, they'll have to have more finely tuned reporting and working with the county. For example, one thing to consider is that all the subrecipients will have to follow federal procurement. So if they want to do any construction, they will have to follow federal procurement guidelines, and if they don't, then any cost related to that construction could be disallowed. So again, something to consider as you're reading through applications. Brandy, do you want to talk, or you want me to take questions?
I think you covered, yeah.
Okay. Does anyone have questions for me?
Justice Lemming?
Thank you. Could you say all that again? That's a lot of information. Basically, you're telling us that every nickel goes out the door, we're going to be audited and going to be looked at.
Yeah.
And we knew that from day one. And that your nonprofits that you talk a lot about is, if we can't get to their book records, that's not a good decision.
Well, I doubt that any of them would refuse to give you their records. It's just, a thought that you're not going to have control over reporting like you would internally.
Right. So the best place to spend that money is in our county, that we have control of all the books.
That's your decision.
Thank you. Thank you.
Justice Simons?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Baker. Do you happen to know offhand the number of applicants that we had total?
I think 46.
46. And do you know what that got weeded down to through
11.
Do you happen to know the dollar amount ask of that? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
The total ask?
Total, about 20 million.
Okay.
Justice Dennis?
Thank you, Judge. Thank you for your presentation. It was very good. One thing that I've learned a little bit about, and I'd like you to clear it up for me, what a nonprofit can charge an administrative fee, I understand. So do you look at that, or is that revealed what they charge?
Do you mean like their internal, like GuideStar or those kind of nonprofit evaluators will give a score to a nonprofit depending on how much they're spending internally on administration? Is that what I may not understand what you're asking.
Well, I understand that a nonprofit can charge a certain percentage to cover their cost.
Yeah.
And that it's pretty high percentage, I think, but I'd learned it some time back, and I don't want to quote what I'd heard. But does one nonprofit charge 5% and another nonprofit charge 10%? Or
Right.
how does that work? And is that cost shown? Do we see that cost?
We did not see that cost.
We did not
We
see that
didn't.
cost. Does that cost exist?
We didn't calculate that. They were all supposed to provide a budget, their nonprofit's budget and financial statements, and not everyone did. So we could have calculated that probably, but we didn't. What we looked at was the project budget, the proposed project, and some of those had very high administrative requests. And we did take note of that. And
Okay.
again, thinking of the intended beneficiary, how does this expenditure of ARPA funds benefit the intended beneficiary? And we didn't find high administrative costs got us there.
Okay.
Those would have failed probably under our disproportionate. If
Yeah,
we
that would
saw
have been disproportionate.
administration, 300,000, and they were asking for 350,000. If only 50,000 was going to the actual harm or the benefit person, then the 300,000 administration, that would have been disproportionate.
Yes.
So
It
we
would be.
did look at it in that context, but not a percentage.
So, okay, bring it down to this for me.
Okay.
Am I gonna know what a nonprofit is gonna keep and how much they're gonna give?
You'd have to look at the project budget.
Yeah, I said each project, yes, each application has an exact list of what they're going to do with that money. What's gonna go to salary, what's going to go to, upgrades, what's going to so yes, we have a budget. All those that we put as eligible have a budget. If they didn't have a budget, they were probably found ineligible. That was the basic necessity.
I'll word it this way. What is the most that a nonprofit can keep,
We didn't ha-
percentage-wise?
It would depend on the application. Some of them didn't ask for any overhead. You know, they were just funding a project, but others would ask for overhead, and it might be appropriate. They might be a smaller
Sure.
nonprofit and need to ask for some admin. But we didn't calculate a percentage or anything like that. That would have to just be gleaned from the application. We did consider that, but we didn't calculate a percentage.
Okay, let me ask this then, follow up on that. How are we going, you say we're responsible for it, how are we going to know if it's not reported to us what they're doing?
We could create a report. I mean, that's certainly possible. It's just not something we thought about before, but we could certainly create a report.
And I can just say, once they are, if you vote, once they're approved, the applications, they will be signing a contract with the county. And I am currently working on a report of required information that they'll be giving. So in those quarterly reports, they will be required to, I will be asking questions, and I have a form for each application so that I will know what they're spending the money on.
But will we? Will we know?
I could present it.
Okay.
You know, however often we needed to, we would report quarterly. So if we needed a presentation quarterly of what each nonprofit has presented, we could.
Well, I'll just say it this way. If you don't have accountability, the possibility is gonna rise on being
Correct.
able to
Correct.
make,
And that was something we really looked
take
at.
some.
Yes, if they could not complete the application or could not give me a budget, then we could pretty much assume that they could not meet the reporting requirements that I would need.
Okay.
So that was something that was definitely looked at. So
Okay.
all of those that you are being presented as eligible would have met those guidelines.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Justice Lyons?
Thank you, Judge. So my questions kind of changed after that last conversation, because like my colleague, I'm very concerned about the accountability and the liability. But it sounds like where I was before, that there's two different reporting requirements based on the rules of ARPA, based on whether you're a beneficiary or a recipient, I think were the two, right? I'd like to understand more about that. I'd like to understand more about what we can put in the contract that they would sign, because if we can give them a contract, then that contract needs to assign the accountability, force the audit ability and the financial reporting back to us so we know they are staying within the rules, and assign the liability if they don't follow the rules that they signed up to follow. So again, if we can't do that, say for one of these, we have to follow these rules, which is where I was in the beginning, right? And for this one we can, this one we can't. Well, the one we can't's disqualified in my mind right away, right?
Right. That's
Okay.
yes.
So I guess as we go through these applications, I would like to understand better, what are the reporting requirements? What are we doing from a contractual standpoint to meet those accountability and liability concerns? To determine, like I said, it was a black and white in my head right now until that last conversation, which is fine, right? It's not criticism. But again, that's where I'm at. If there's no accountability, then they're disqualified, because if we can't hold them accountable, I don't want to give them any money.
So, do you want to speak? You
No,
could.
go ahead.
So on that contract, there is sections of it that
You're gonna have
states-
to
I'm sorry.
pull that over.
So, in
It
that
will move if
contract-
you want to canter it a little bit
Oh,
that way. I think
Okay,
you're-
thank you. So, yes, in that contract, it would clearly state the requirements and the repayment of not following through with those requirements that would be done quarterly. Again, as far as the applications that we presented as eligible met the requirements given their budget, their, what their financial, what they had, they could do. And so, I feel good about that. All the ones that were ineligible, again, that's something that we looked at. If they could not give us a budget, if they could not show us any financial controls within their own organization, then they're not gonna be presented as an eligible, and that'll be up to you. But if they were presented eligible, then they did meet those requirements, and it'll be a matter of signing contracts and getting all their other information at that time.
Any other questions for Ms. Baker or Ms. Wilhite? Justice Coger?
Thank you very much. Just a point of clarity on a couple of things, please. First of all, the ARPA money, the American Rescue Plan Act, was to help those who were disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, and especially those in communities that were already underserved. Am I correct on that? I mean,
That was one use. There were other uses,
Right.
but that was one use.
okay, but so when we're talking about nonprofits, and something was said about, I don't remember who said about the county, it would be better to go to the county. You're not saying that nonprofits we shouldn't consider nonprofits.
No, nonprofits are explicitly eligible.
Right, and just for my colleagues, if you look at the National Association of Counties, there's hundreds and hundreds of jurisdictions who have given money to nonprofits. And with nonprofits, they're boots on the ground. They're there every day, so they know what the communities need. Thank you.
Justice Lyons?
I'm sorry, one last question. What's the timing? As far as applications coming to us, review, the time to review it,
Well, that'll be up to you, you justices on the court, of what your timing, how quick you are about turning this around. My goal is to get you some information starting tomorrow. Once again, these are large files, so we're gonna try to, Ms. Wilhite's come up with a process to zip file those and send them to you in an email. But it might, technology is great until it doesn't work. And so, I mean, we've even come up with a triage backup plan that we might have to provide you guys with jump drives, you know what I mean, with these on them, just because it's so
Soon,
big.
we're gonna start seeing your package.
You're gonna start seeing a packet. And what I will go over there too is what we've started out is they have created an evaluation form. So you're gonna see that as a separate file that basically summarizes their evaluation of it. There'll also be another file. This is all subject to change if we, you know, I mean, we want to get this to you. And the other file was the actual application that the applicant submitted to us online. And then basically what we're looking at right now is maybe a third file with like all the backup, all the supporting materials. And so, you know, this is up to you guys to how comfortable are you? How quickly are you comfortable to do this?
Okay.
You know, I guess where I see this now is we're trying to work very hard to get you the information and then kind of pass the baton off. You know what I mean? To let you guys start evaluating these and voting on them.
But there's
So,
some milestones we have to meet. We just need to understand what those are, right?
yeah.
Okay.
And,
then-
you know, I would like to, I'll consult with our county attorney, but I think what this would essentially be is like we've done the other ARPA allocations, this would probably be an ordinance. If an organization meets your criteria and you would like to sponsor that as a JP, we would have an ordinance written up per organization so that we could bring it to this body and vote on it. That's how, once again, that's how I see it so far, but we're just, you know, we're new. Ms. Baker pointed that out. This evaluation process was new because ARPA's new. Well, now we're kind of in a new, you know, each new step we take is new to us, and so we're trying to very much give you guys as much information as possible so that you can start evaluating these. And
A little off subject, but you stepped the toe into my world a little bit, talking about zipping it up and emailing it, and I notice we get a lot of things emailed. Do we as a county not have the ability to have an area that's shared that we can all get to poll?
I can check into that.
Okay. It would be much better.
Yeah, I'm not.
Solution.
You know, once again, there's a little bit of sensitivity here with, you know, we want to make that secure and everything. I'm open to that. Listen, I'm not a technology
No, I understand.
person, and so we're welcome to input if you guys have input about how you'd rather see this. And once again, we'll try to be fair to get it all to everybody all at once, and so
I
everybody
think
can
it'd be easier if it was in one place we pull versus trying to get it all. I don't know what the email servers do. I know working out in the industry I work in, we run into it all the time. You try to
Great.
ship a great big file and it gets rejected or whatever, and
Yeah.
it just wastes time. So
Okay.
that's fine. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. JP Hires?
Yeah, thank you, Judge. I'd just like to say that if we do go with email, I think that we need a code word because we get a lot of emails that look like they're coming from Washington County that are actually like phishing scams. So we need like a safe word or something to be added to that. Yeah.
Come up with the code, okay.
Justice Coger?
Thank you, Judge. You said you've narrowed it down to 11. Have you notified the ones who weren't eligible? Have they been notified yet?
No, I've
Okay.
just made recommendations.
Okay.
No decisions have been made.
Okay, I wasn't sure about that. And I just want to mention to my colleagues, I'm glad to hear you say that you're so concerned about this money being applicable and being used correctly. Because when we just allocated the money for the jail, it says in there it cannot, point of privilege.
Justice Eki, do you have a point of order?
Point of
Get your-
privilege
get your-
overrides a point of order.
You're out of order now. No, I'm the chair. Justice Eki, will you please cue your mic? Yes, Justice Eki.
Thank you, Judge. It's not the privilege of a JP to lecture or remind or recommend anything to their colleagues. It is up to the person to decide what they are going to do on behalf of their district. And so the discussion is going down a rabbit hole and taking up the time. So point of order.
Thank you, Justice Eki. Justice Coger, will you try to accommodate your colleague a little bit?
Will I try to what?
Accommodate your colleague a little bit there. Try to take that into consideration.
I'm doing that. I'd like to say that I have a point of privilege on the floor, okay? My point of privilege is that I get to finish what I'm saying here.
Not when there's point of order called.
Okay. I think what I'm saying is relevant. It needs, and it fits in with this. We're talking about millions of dollars. And if we So I just want to say that it says in there, in the rules, that we cannot use ARPA money for a jail expansion, and we did that. So I sit here tonight, and I hear everybody concerned about whether or not this is an eligible, how we have to be careful. And I just don't, I see that kind of as being two-faced. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Justice Lyons?
I'm sorry, what we're discussing here is a process to get the applications, measure them, and make decisions on them, not to go back and debate past decisions that have already been made.
Yeah, I appreciate
I do
that.
not believe this is applicable to this discussion, and we need to move on, please.
I want to thank you too for your hard work, Ms. Baker. I want to, you both worked hard. I especially want to thank Ms. Baker in an effort to get this to you very soon. We had a meeting Friday morning to try to put final touches on this, and Ms. Baker worked over the weekend, and I just really want to commend that. Ms. Wilhite's been here, working. They've been coordinating. So I appreciate you guys' time tonight, and thank you so much. And I think this was beneficial to everybody, and we'll start getting you the information, and you guys just let us know. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Last item we have on the agenda is a public comment period. We have a 12-minute public comment period with a limit of 3 minutes per person. Any public comments this evening?
Hi, I'm Sarah Moore, Fayetteville. I wanted to go back in our conversations. I got a couple of topics that I wanted to talk about, but going back to the jail update, I did make a note when you were talking about the 309s, and when we're considering the fact that we've had over incarceration at the jail and we have 82 people sleeping on the full floor, I appreciate that we're having conversations and we're looking at the possibility of what remedies we can do to be able to free up space in the jail. And the 309s are a relevant conversation. One of the things is to look at what's happening in other areas across the state and in other places across the nation. I just want to bring to your attention that in Benton County to our north, they do not use 309s. They do use trustees, and they do internally use individuals. And so as they've created a detentions and facilities committee that will be meeting and trying to address their overcrowding, that's an opportunity to try to collaborate with those individuals as well to see what they've explored when we're talking about kitchen service and cleaning of the facility, of how they've figured out ways to potentially mitigate cost to bring into the conversation possibly. And I'm sure that you probably talked to your colleagues in Benton County some, but I just wanted to bring that forward, that Benton County does operate in a different way. And moving on to the ARPA discussion, and I appreciate that there's been a process put forward. But one of the things in the city of Fayetteville and that we can look at, and looking at NACO and other places across the nation that have already set up processes, we've talked about whether or not you're going to have to email this or the cumbersomeness of trying to exchange information, but I would like to really extend the offer to put this out on the county website. This is the people's information. This is FOIA-able information that has been provided. The city of Fayetteville has had a fully transparent process. Every bit of the applications and how the decisions have been made have been put out on the city's website. And so that gives full transparency. So you don't have to worry about, not being able to get a file or struggling to navigate. I would just encourage that. And I'd really encourage, despite what's been put in place with the matrix, that we really do think about the fact that the heart of ARPA has been to really help disproportionately impacted populations. And so while I appreciate the diligence and the process that's been set up, the recommendations that are made, there were over 40 organizations that did apply for those monies because they have been serving your community. And so I hope that you will go through there and not totally disallow and only look at the 11, but you'll really dig in to understand what were the reasons that those other orgs came forward, because many of those have been serving, hanging on by their fingernails, and they need the support.
That's 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Public comments.
Hello, my name is April Backroad, and I'm from Springdale, Arkansas. And I just want to say thank you all so much for doing an update on the ARPA funds and for the real thoughtful process by the Northwest Arkansas Council. It sounded like someone who spoke my grant language, so I see kind of where we're going, and I think it's a great idea. I think I'm most concerned is what I'm hearing is almost like a mistrust of nonprofit organizations and how we utilize money and what we spend it on and administrative costs. And I can tell you, I've been writing grants as a university professor and a nonprofit leader for, oh goodness, I'm getting old, about over 10 years. Never in my life have I paid an administrative salary. There is not a single grant at Magdalen that goes towards my salary or any of my administrator's salary. If I can even ask for salary, which is so very rare, and I always prioritize my programs first, it is just staff who directly work with clients on a daily basis. And even that is super rare to be able to get that sort of funding. So I just want you all to rest assured that that's not something we do at nonprofits. We're not in this work for the money. I'm not in this work for the salary. I'm doing this to serve an extremely vulnerable population and to provide a really outstanding service that our community supports, which is awesome that I have the privilege of doing that. Also, don't forget that nonprofits' financials, that's public record. I put my audited financial statements, my 990, that goes online every single year. So you don't have to worry about keeping that confidential. That's public information. And you should all see how we allocate our budget and where it goes and how we are operating. And that's why it's public, because we're public organizations serving our community. And in terms of reporting, I'm going through this process now with the city of Fayetteville, and there is never been an incident where federal money doesn't come with a ton of reporting. It's what we're used to. There is an insane amount of accountability with federal funds. There's a lot of accountability for a $500 grant I get from a local civic club. People don't just write checks anymore. You have to report. You have to give them financial information. You have to provide how you're meeting your outcomes. And that's something that we're very used to and that I would be happy to provide. So just rest assured that we as nonprofits, we're willing to do this right and make sure that this money is used to serve our community. Thank you all.
That's time. Public comments.
Evening, Judge Deacons, members of the Quorum Court. My name's Martin Miller. Thank you for your time tonight. I'm a longtime Washington County resident. I appreciate all the work you do. I'm also the executive director with Theater Squared in Fayetteville, and I'm here tonight for a bit of an introduction and an invitation. We are an ARPA applicant. I'm not sure if we're among the recommended applicants. Whether or not, we'd love to see you all in our space, and I wanted to give you a personal invitation to tour the facility, to sit down and talk about the programs we're doing. I'm really proud that Arkansas's largest theater is right here in Washington County, largest producing theater. I'm really proud of, we reached 85,000 people last year. We are in every part of Washington County. In fact, we're all over the state. We work with 25 different schools. We bring free performances to 25 schools across Washington County, in Fayetteville, in Springdale, Elkins, Farmington, Goshen, Greenland, Johnson, Lincoln, Prairie Grove, Taneytown, West Fork, Winslow, and tons of great home schools as well. So hopefully if you have kids or grandkids, they may know our work. Something else I'm really proud of is that we, as a nonprofit, give out a lot of tickets for free or for a low cost. In fact, this season alone, we've given out 2,500 tickets to veterans who've come to shows throughout the season. And I tell you, it is moving when folks bring their family to see one of the first shows they've seen in years, together as a family, especially when many of them just returned from serving abroad. It's a wonderful experience. So if you haven't made it in to see a play, we'd love to invite you. We did have a really challenging time when performances were suspended, as you can imagine, when your business is bringing people together in person in a theater or for events and going into schools and working with teachers. It requires a lot of change to suddenly not be able to gather in person. And so we do have an ARPA request pending because we had a lot of lost revenue at that time, and that's what helps us to do this work that I'm talking about in schools throughout the county and for members of the community who would otherwise be unable to afford a ticket. And I will say, however, I hope that this is just the first of many conversations we have about things we can do to work together, had a good relationship with Judge Wood and his staff, and hoping that we can work together as well, Judge Deakins, and talk about ways we can use facilities or partner in other ways just to make sure we're serving every resident of Washington County and making sure that, that they take advantage of the public trust and the nonprofit that we exist to serve them and all of you. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Right on time. Public comments. With that, we're going to be adjourned.